The Final Countdown is one of the boldest what-if premises in sci-fi history. A story about a modern nuclear warship thrown back to the day before Pearl Harbor, forced to decide whether to change history forever. But the version you saw in theaters almost ended very differently. Did you know the official novelization finally answers the one question the film never did? What created the time vortex? Or that the Pentagon pulled the real Nimitz away during filming for a classified military mission? Today, we're uncovering 16 hidden truths about The Final Countdown 1980, including how this movie helped inspire Top Gun and Doctor Who series. Number 1. The alternate alien ending. In the film, the time vortex is never explained. It simply appears, pulls the USS Nimitz back to 1941, and then returns the ship to 1980 at the end of the story. The movie never tells us what created it or why it appeared. But the novelization released in August 1980, written by Martin Kadin, adds more to the story. The book mostly follows the film, but after the final scene where Warren Lasky meets the elderly Tideman and Laurel, the novel continues for about 3 more pages. In those extra pages, the book finally explains where the time vortex came from. The strange time vortex was not a random storm or natural event. It had an extraterrestrial origin, and aliens were behind it. The novelization introduces this idea, but doesn't fully explain it. The book's ending seems to leave the door open for a sequel that was never made. Some fans believe Martin Kadin originally wanted to make a sequel and would have explored the idea that these aliens were cosmic observers. They manipulated the human timeline as an experiment or as a way of studying humanity, similar to the cosmic zoo concept popularized by John Ball in 1973. So the answer to the film's biggest mystery, who or what sent Nimitz back in time, was never revealed in the movie itself. It only appeared in the tie-in novel, while the bigger story was left for a follow-up that never came. Number 2. The real war that ended the movie. In the spring of 1980, the film crew was still aboard the USS Nimitz shooting extra footage when word came down from the Pentagon. The carrier was being recalled for a classified mission. That mission was Operation Eagle Claw, the attempted rescue of 52 American hostages held at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Iran. The helicopters that would carry out the rescue launched from the very same flight deck where the film crew had been working days earlier. On April 24, 1980, the mission ended in disaster when a helicopter collided with a C-130 transport aircraft in the Iranian desert, killing 8 American servicemen. The film crew never returned to the Nimitz. Remaining shots were completed on other Navy ships, and most audiences never realized that some parts of the movie were filmed on different vessels. Number 3. The original script went back to World War I. In The Final Countdown, Pearl Harbor feels like the ideal historical event for this kind of time travel dilemma. But in the original screenplay, the aircraft carrier was not sent back to Pearl Harbor at all, and it was a completely different story. Written under the title The Last Countdown, the script used the Bermuda Triangle to transport an aircraft carrier. It transported the ship not to the Pacific in 1941, but to the Mediterranean just before the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the event that triggered World War I. The moral dilemma would have been entirely different. Instead of debating whether to stop Pearl Harbor, the crew would have had to decide whether to stop Gavrilo Princip from assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The screenplay sat in development until Peter Douglas acquired it and made the change to Pearl Harbor. That decision transformed everything, swapping a European political crisis for a visceral military ambush that American audiences could feel in their bones. Number 4. The senator who stormed Omaha Beach. Charles Durning, who plays Senator Chapman, was one of the most decorated combat veterans in Hollywood history. Charles Durning landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day as part of the first wave with the Army's 1st Infantry Division. He was the only survivor of his unit. During the battle, he killed 7 German gunners but suffered severe machine gun wounds to his right leg and shrapnel wounds across his body. After 6 months of recovery in England, he was rushed back to the front lines. At the Battle of the Bulge, he was stabbed 8 times in hand-to-hand bayonet combat, captured by German troops, and later survived a massacre in which other American prisoners of war were killed. He earned a Silver Star for Valor, a Bronze Star, and 3 Purple Hearts. So when Durning's senator stands on the deck of the Nimitz and watches F-14 launch into a sky that leads back to December 1941, there's a weight to that performance that no script could manufacture. Number 5. The theory that changes everything. Here's where it gets interesting. A popular fan theory suggests that the elderly Tideman didn't just live through history after being stranded in 1941. He engineered the entire thing. The theory works like this. After Commander Owens was left behind in the past, he married Laurel Scott, built Tideman Industries into a defense contracting empire, and over the next 4 decades, used that empire's resources to develop or acquire the technology that created the time vortex in the first place. He didn't stumble into a time loop, he is the one who built it. The novelization's revelation that the vortex had an extraterrestrial origin adds another layer. Some fans believe Tideman may have gained access to alien technology and reverse-engineered it. If this theory is true, then every event in the film, from Lasky's assignment to the vortex itself, was orchestrated by one man who had 40 years to plan it. Number 6. The battle you were never allowed to see. The biggest complaint about the final countdown has always been the ending. You spend the entire film waiting for a modern aircraft carrier armed with F-14 Tomcats to face off against the Japanese fleet. The strike planes finally launch, and then the time vortex yanks the Nimitz back to 1980 before a single shot is fired. But in the original screenplay, that battle actually happened. The original script had the USS Nimitz actually attack the Japanese fleet before the time vortex pulled it back to 1980. The ending was changed so audiences would not see the battle itself. Instead, they would be left thinking about the bigger question: what would happen if a modern aircraft carrier actually changed history by stopping Pearl Harbor? The studio probably thought that kind of ending would feel smarter and more thought-provoking. But to many critics and viewers, it felt like they got cheated. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, the 2 most influential film critics of the era, named the film one of the worst of 1980, specifically citing the anticlimax of a movie that ends without its soldiers going into battle. The fight that fans waited 90 minutes for was scripted and ready to shoot. It just never made it to the screen. Number 7. The Captain Who Lived It. Kirk Douglas plays Captain Matthew Yelland, a Navy captain on a modern aircraft carrier, heading back to Pearl Harbor. But Douglas was not just pretending to be a military man. In real life, he joined the United States Navy in 1941, not long after the real attack on Pearl Harbor. During World War II, he served in the Pacific on a submarine chaser, a smaller warship used to hunt enemy submarines. His job involved communications and weapons. Then, in 1943, an accident happened on board. Another sailor accidentally set off a depth charge, an underwater bomb used against submarines. The blast injured Douglas, and he later developed a serious illness that led to his honorable discharge in 1944. Nearly 40 years later, he stood on the deck of the USS Nimitz, playing a Navy captain caught in a story about Pearl Harbor. That gives his role a strange real-life weight, because he was not just acting near history. In a way, he had lived through it. Number 8. The country that banned the film. In the mid-1980s, the communist government of Hungary banned the final countdown, saying the movie made the United States military look too heroic. But banning a movie did not mean people stopped watching it. Illegal VHS copies still spread across the country, and many Hungarians are still watching it. And here's the strange part. The bootleg version did not simply copy the film exactly as it was. Some scenes were removed, especially the scenes with the Russian spy ship following the USS Nimitz. The scenes showing American military power stayed in the movie, but the scenes showing Soviet spying were cut out. At the time, Hungary was still under heavy Soviet influence, so those scenes may have felt more politically dangerous than the American Navy scenes. So someone seemed to decide that showing a powerful US aircraft carrier was less risky than showing Soviet spies watching from the shadows. Number 9. 6 years before Top Gun. Today, when people think of the F-14 Tomcat on film, they think of Top Gun. But the final countdown brought the F-14 to the big screen first, 6 years earlier. The movie used real F-14 Tomcat fighter jets from VF-84, the famous US Navy squadron known as the Jolly Rogers. It also created one of the strangest aerial battle scenes ever filmed. A modern jet fighter going up against old Japanese Zero planes from World War II. That was not easy to shoot. The F-14 was built for speed, while the Zero was a much slower propeller plane. To keep both aircraft visible in the same camera shot, the F-14 had to fly extremely slowly, almost at their lowest safe speed, while the Zeros had to fly as fast as they could. After the film was released, the US Navy even used it as a recruiting tool, with a theatrical poster appearing in Navy recruiting offices across the country. For 6 years, The Final Countdown was the Navy's big showcase for naval aviation, until a film starring Tom Cruise came along and made everyone forget which movie got there first. Number 10. The man who created the Cybermen. One of the 4 screenwriters credited on The Final Countdown is a name most film audiences wouldn't recognize: Jerry Davis. But science fiction fans know him well. Davis was the British television writer who co-created the Cybermen, one of Doctor Who's most iconic and enduring villains. He created Cybermen in the 1960s during his time as story editor on the BBC series. He worked on more than 70 episodes of Doctor Who. Although Jerry Davis worked on many Doctor Who episodes, The Final Countdown was the only major movie that credited him as a screenwriter. It's a strange and fitting connection. One of the most famous time travel premises in cinema history was partly written by a man who had spent years working on the most famous time travel show in television history. Number 11. The shot they hid from the Admirals. During the dogfight sequence, VF-84 Executive Officer Richard Fox Farrell was flying his F-14 Tomcat when he pulled the jet up dangerously low over the ocean. At one point, the aircraft was only about 100 feet above the water. It flew so close to the surface that it kicked up a trail of seawater behind it. On camera, it became one of the most breathtaking shots in the film. But Farrell had flown the Tomcat far lower and more dangerously than the Navy would normally allow. The film crew knew that if the Navy's top officers saw that shot in the daily footage, they might shut down the production over the risky maneuver. So they made a bold choice. They kept Farrell's footage out of the material shown to the Navy brass. The Admirals did not see it until the finished movie. By then, it was too late to cut it, and the shot remains one of the most iconic moments in the film. Number 12. The emergency that became a scene. During filming, the USS Nimitz was still an active warship conducting real naval operations, and something unexpected happened. An A-7 Corsair II returning from a mission came in for landing with a malfunction. Its tailhook failed to catch the arresting wire, so the crew had to deploy the barricade. An emergency net stretched across the deck to stop the aircraft. This wasn't part of any script. It was a genuine emergency happening in real time on an active warship. But the production crew was allowed to keep their cameras rolling, and they captured the entire recovery. The footage made it into the finished film, appearing during the time vortex passage as if it were a planned dramatic beat. Most viewers have no idea they're watching a real emergency unfold. It's one of those rare moments where reality gave the filmmakers something no amount of planning could have produced. Number 13. The Squadron that launched an anime empire. Throughout The Final Countdown, the camera lingers on the skull and crossbones livery of VF-84, the Jolly Rogers painted across their F-14 Tomcats. It's one of the most striking images in the film, and it caught the attention of people far beyond Hollywood. In 1982, 2 years after The Final Countdown's release, Japanese animators launched a sci-fi television series called Robotech. The series' hero, Roy Fokker, flies a transforming fighter jet called the VF-1S Valkyrie, and that futuristic aircraft was directly modeled based on F-14 Tomcat's variable sweep wing design. But the connection goes deeper than the aircraft. Fokker's personal insignia is a skull and crossbones lifted straight from VF-84's livery. The entire Skull Squadron became one of the most iconic elements of the franchise, appearing across multiple series for decades. When VF-84's real commanding officers eventually learned that a Japanese anime had borrowed their look and that the show was contributing to a spike in the squadron's popularity, they were reportedly unimpressed. But the cultural impact was undeniable. A Navy squadron's paint job became the visual DNA of one of the most influential anime franchises ever created. Number 14. The pilots had the wrong paycheck. During production, the real Navy pilots from VF-84 were part of the shoot because they were the ones actually flying the F-14 Tomcats seen in the movie. These were not actors pretending to be pilots, they were real Navy aviators. But even though they were military pilots, they were not simply driving themselves around like regular Navy personnel. Because this was a Hollywood production, professional drivers from a union called the International Brotherhood of Teamsters were brought in specifically to transport them during filming. That was standard procedure in the film industry. But when the pilots discovered how much those drivers were being paid, they were stunned. The drivers were earning more money than the Navy aviators who were risking their lives flying F-14 Tomcats at near-stall speed just 100 feet above the ocean. The VF-84 pilots enjoyed the whole Hollywood experience: the attention, the cameras, the excitement, and the feeling of being part of a major movie production. But that paycheck detail became the story they kept telling afterward. Number 15. The jet blast that almost killed a war hero. During the dogfight sequence, one of the F-14 Tomcats was supposed to fly directly under the two Japanese Zeros to intimidate them, but the trial flyby went wrong. The jet blast from the passing Tomcat hit both Zeros with invisible turbulence so violent that it ripped the control yokes out of the pilot's hands. Both aircraft tumbled out of control like toys. The lead Zero pilot's wristwatch and communications headset were sucked straight out of his open cockpit by the force of the air. Without a headset, he had no way to radio anyone. For several long seconds, nobody on the production knew whether both pilots were still alive. Filming shut down for the rest of the day. But here's the part that makes this story unforgettable. One of those Zero pilots was Archie Donahue, a retired Marine Corps colonel who had been a real fighter ace during World War II. Donahue shot down 14 Japanese planes during the war, including 5 in a single day over Guadalcanal. Some of those kills were actual Mitsubishi Zeros. So in 1979, a man who once hunted Zeros in combat was now sitting inside one, flying it for a movie, and nearly died not from enemy fire, but from the turbulence of an American jet passing too close beneath him. Number 16. The movie that ended a Navy career. The U.S. Navy gave the production full access to the Nimitz, including its aircraft and flight crews. But 3 years after the film was released, that cooperation became a federal criminal case. Commander Emory Brown, one of the senior officers aboard the Nimitz during filming and commanding officer of VF-84, was indicted on charges of bribery and conspiracy. The accusation was simple. Brown had reported only 32.5 hours of flight time to the production company, but federal investigators found that the Nimitz's planes had actually flown more than 200 hours for the movie. That meant the Navy absorbed the real cost, while the producers paid far less than they should have. That gap saved the producers nearly $700,000. Federal prosecutors found a note suggesting that Brown had allegedly received a payment through a middleman in exchange for keeping the Navy's bill low. Brown denied the accusation, but the court still convicted him of a lesser offense, accepting an illegal gratuity. After that, his military career was over. The final countdown asked one of the biggest questions in all of science fiction. If you had the power to change history, should you? And then it made you sit with the answer. If this video surprised you, drop a comment telling us which fact caught you off guard. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive, and we'll see you in the next one.